Hi everyone, welcome to the Obizz podcast series. We are sharing information on health, wellness and business, and hope you're finding our shares and information useful. Today we're talking about business, but more from a legal perspective, and we actually have and are honored to have one of our core COVID Kenya Obizz members, Shah, who is a very well-renowned lawyer in Kenya. Welcome to you, Paras.
Thank you, Snare. Pleasure to be here.
Yes. And we're talking about quite a relevant topic on landlords and tenants, which most businesses are somehow affected on. So we'll get some advice as to what tenants can do, but also many businesses who are also landlords to see what sort of legal aspects they would also be affected with. But before we dive into that, so Paras, maybe something a bit off topic, but I understand radio is not new to you. You've been a part-time radio DJ before.
In my own life, 20 years ago.
Right.
I was hired by one of the founders of this station to work on a weekly segment at East FM.
Okay.
It didn't last very long.
Okay.
My talents are better used elsewhere.
Some hidden talents coming out, and maybe who knows, you might come back and revive that. But I remember, Paras, we met probably 12 years ago when we were doing a big telecom transaction.
Correct.
So tell us about your journey. Like what has been your law journey?
It's been a great journey, Snare. You're right. We met 12 years ago. I've been practicing law in Nairobi for 20 years, and prior to that I was working in London as well. But I've been very fortunate. I've been very fortunate being in the right time, at the right time, at the right place. When I came back in 1999, back to Nairobi, things weren't great in the economy, but after 2002, we all know what happened when Kibaki took over. Things really took off. So I've been very fortunate to be part of that journey. I've done a lot of privatization work, which was where we met when telecom was privatized. I've done most of the IPOs in this country, which was part of that privatization process. And I do a lot of M&A work, mergers and acquisitions work, and again have been very fortunate that have worked on some of the landmark deals in the last 2 decades. So it's been a great journey, actually, and I always say to people there is opportunity in our country and in our region.
Right, and you sort of see the barometer of where we're heading as a country, especially from a sort of big business perspective. Maybe before we get into our topic, where do you despite COVID, where do you think we are and where we're heading to?
Look, Snare, the long-term fundamentals of this region and our country are still sound, in my opinion. And when I talk to our clients, particularly our foreign clients, they see the same thing. And I think when you look at what the returns are going to be in the West or in more developed countries in the next 5 to 10 years, with zero interest rates and maybe negative interest rates and really problematic recessions in those developed and large economies, the returns here, even though they might be lower than they were 5-10 years ago, are still very attractive. We still have a growing consumer market. We still have a young population. We still have a lot of the right things in terms of the geography and the raw materials. And I think COVID is going to accelerate some of the things we didn't do as a country, as an economy. For example, I think our manufacturing base should get more investment as manufacturing lines get decentralized from China, for example, and then closer to source production. So I think we're going to benefit from all of that. I think there'll be more process addition, or value addition in terms of our raw materials as well that we export. Again, COVID has shown supply chains are very weak when you rely heavily on raw materials going to one place and then being produced and shipped back and so on. So I think we're going to benefit from it. From where we sit today, we have seen an uptick in our work in the last, I would say, 2 months since August. And it is, I wouldn't say it's looking hugely positive right now, but I think it's much better than where we were earlier even pre-COVID.
Okay.
So I think I'm optimistic.
Great.
As
No,
you can see.
it's good to hear some glimmers of hope, in this sort of gloomy world at this point in time. But let's turn to sort of the more pragmatic topic regarding sort of rents and landlords. And so, first of all, what have you seen in the last 6 months as far as the trends of rentals?
Yeah. So. So let's go back to March when the first kind of we are not fully locked down, but a lockdown was announced here in Kenya in whatever sense it was. I think there was a utter panic at that time, particularly from our SMEs who may be in shopping malls, who may be in line shops, or people who are in smaller offices. Let me put it that way. People just didn't know what was going on, and there was a lot of panic. And at that time, if you recall, there was a lot of talk about people saying, "I need to give up my lease, I cannot afford my rent," and so on and so forth. And there was a huge, for the first month in March, I remember there was a lot of people talking about closing their business and other thing. I think what happened at that time were conversations started happening between landlords and tenants, and I think sensible discussions were had. Landlords realized they need to be they need to have a relationship with the tenant, and the tenants were, whilst they were panicking, also realized they need to be in business. So sensible discussions were had. I think by and large, from what I see, people got rebates, people got different terms, people got concessions, just to allow them to breathe through the next 2-3 months. And I think if you then fast forward to, I would say, in the May, June, July period, where things actually, people started going back. People started shopping again, people whatever. So you categorize your businesses into 3 different areas at that point in time. One is the essentials. So the supermarkets, the banks, the health facilities did not suffer at all. If anything, their business went to a huge panic increase in March, April, and then probably normalized, maybe down a little bit, but then kind of normal now. When I talk to my large retail clients, I think they're seeing, like supermarkets, I think they're seeing business levels back to pre-COVID levels just about now. Then the second category of people were what I would call the still open for business but hurt kind of category. So these are your small retailers, clothes shops, whatever.
Yes.
And they suffered. They continue to suffer. People are not still, the shopping habits are not going, and there's no money in the market as well. So those have suffered, and with that category, I think that's where the concessions came in. Or I know, I advise some malls, and they've given them turnover-based kind of rents, at least to see them through the end of the year or till October and November.
And these kind of changes, have they been done more on an informal basis?
Totally on an ad hoc basis. Right. There is no systematic thing. And I'll come to kind of what people thought was a system for this.
Yes.
And then there was the other category who were just dead. Restaurants, bars, people who just did not have a business to operate. And some of those have closed down and will close down. I mean, I don't see the restaurant I wouldn't say restaurant, but I don't see the hospitality industry going back to the levels it was for a long, long time. And I think our habits also as consumers will change.
Right. Yes. I mean, just in terms of habits and sustainable trends. You mentioned those categories, but there's another category where, you could say, thanks to COVID, people have found different ways of working and efficient. So just to give you a personal example, like we run a 100-seat call center, and before COVID, it was run in a big central place. Now all our call center workers are working from home, and they're getting good efficiency. They don't have to travel so much. For us, with huge rent savings, etc. So that's another trend as well.
And the other trend related kind of to what you're saying is, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've certainly noticed on social media the huge uptick in what I would call cottage industry online. So people selling stuff from home, making stuff from home, whether it's food or clothes or shoes or whatever. I bought a pair of shoes yesterday from someone who I don't know, maybe, but it just looked attractive. It was delivered and it's done. So our habits are going to change. I think the online thing will I mean, we're already quite a good society for kind of getting on with technology.
Right.
And
okay, so
you know,
Paras,
that's
just
gonna be
coming back to sort of the legal aspect of tenancies. So, can you describe how sort of watertight these rental agreements are? Because I understand in Kenya you need to have sort of a minimum 5-year lease. So if you are a tenant and you're tied into that, what sort of room for maneuver do you have to renegotiate that?
So Snare, most of our leases are fairly standard. Okay, so I'll just kind of generalize that. I haven't seen any kind of really tailor-made lease until except for the really big retailers or maybe nowadays, but traditionally they've been very bog standard leases. And initially people all started getting very excited about a concept called force majeure and started saying pandemics and force majeure and we can get our leases or we don't pay our rent and so on. That is all nonsense. So our leases are very simple. You have to pay, as a tenant, you have to pay rent and the landlord has to provide you your premises. Full stop. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
And if you don't pay your rent, the landlord has remedies to distress or eventually even get the premises vacated. As a tenant, COVID or not, the leases do not recognize the fact that your business might go down. And therefore, what do you do with your rent? You have to pay your rent. It's a simple thing.
Right. But in the way the leases are structured here, are there sort of get out clauses or exit clauses?
So as you said, commercial leases by and large are in excess of 5 years. Otherwise you become what we call a control tenant. And if you are, then that's at will. There are a few like that who don't have leases, in which case you have that flexibility. If you have a lease of 5 years, you are stuck for that 5-year period. So if you're in year 3, you have to wait it out till 5 years or negotiate with your landlord for an early surrender. But it's purely a negotiation. There is no right to early surrender.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is if I'm a tenant, my business has changed and I need to get out of that lease, then the only option I have is to do a commercial negotiation.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what has been happening in the last few months. And fortunately, landlords have been sensible. Because remember, even pre-COVID, we have a massive oversupply of retail, of offices, and generally commercial real estate or residential real estate for that matter as well. So even before that, it was becoming a tenant's market. So landlords are, I wouldn't say desperate, but are fairly keen on keeping their premises occupied. Now, I'll give you an example. In a shopping mall, you have to pay service charge.
Yes.
So if a premises or if a shop is empty, the landlord's going to have to pay that service charge. They'd rather give that out for a low rent, but have that overhead covered. Or they rather give that out and make sure the footfalls remain high for the anchor tenants. So it's in landlord's interest. And that's why sensible discussions have been had. By and large, all the shopping malls that I am aware of have had very sensible discussions with their tenants. And that's why you see fairly good occupation, and even in the new malls like Sarit Extension, etc., you would see new shops opening and actually doing reasonably okay.
Okay. And do you have an indication of to what extent rents may come down?
It's difficult to generalize, but I can say I have seen rent discounts of anything between 20 and 50%, but maybe for restaurants and things even more than that. But what is more interesting is I've also seen some malls go into turnover-based leases. So there is actually a sharing of risk,
right,
up and down.
And when you say these discounts, 20 to 50%, would they be for potentially the rest of the lease?
No. That will be usually quarter to quarter.
Okay.
So now we're probably in the second quarter, or now entering the third quarter. And I think they'll probably, I suspect these will go on until the end of the year, depending on how things are.
Right, but if I'm looking to get a new premises, sign a new lease, then to what extent have market rates come
look,
down?
rents have come down drastically.
Right.
I'll give you an example. Office rents, we're going prime offices on the highway here, were anything between $20, $30, $40. I've even seen $50.
Yes.
I can tell you those prime offices are now at 100 shillings, 110, maybe even less. If you go subprime, looking at 60 shillings, 70 shillings, what used to be 100 shillings.
Right.
So I think commercial rents have dropped. I don't have the figures, but I would guesstimate 30-40% commercial rents dropped.
Okay.
So and that will remain for a long time, I think, because not only because of COVID, but because there's an oversupply.
Right. Okay. So you've described sort of the legal jurisdiction on leases, but are there other avenues? So, for example, instead of tying up in a 5-year lease, is there an option to say get into some sort of license arrangement?
The law doesn't allow that, unfortunately. You can call anything a license, or you can call it anything else. A lease is a lease. If you have a premises which you occupy exclusively, whatever you want to call it, it's a lease.
Okay.
And you can write whatever you want, but if it's a lease, it's a lease. And that's what the law will say. So you're stuck.
Right.
Now, many people try and go around it by calling it a license or this or that, but it doesn't work.
Okay, so just to explore that a bit more. So if I'm a tenant and I'm offered by a landlord who is probably desperate to get that space occupied, so instead of agreeing to sign a 5-year lease, we sign a 1 or 2 year license. So are you saying that kind of document may not hold?
No, it will. For the tenant, that's a very good thing, by the way.
That is a good thing.
Because you've got a less than 5-year lease, which means you become what we call a controlled tenant.
Right.
A controlled tenancy, just to quickly tell you, means that you are not subjected to any, so any rent reviews would have to go through a rent tribunal, which is a very difficult process. Unless you don't pay rent, they can't really kick you out. And kicking a tenant out is, if you have a lease, it's a fairly laid down process. If you don't have a lease, you have to again go through a tribunal. It's a long process. And it's very hard to get rid of a controlled tenant, and it's very hard to increase the rent of a controlled tenant.
I see.
And that's why landlords should not enter into such kind of arrangements.
Okay.
They might, unless if they're really desperate.
Right.
Or if you're a very good tenant and there's a lot of trust and so on and so forth. But if you look at it straight from a legal point of view, it's a very dangerous thing for a landlord. And it's a very beneficial thing for a tenant.
Okay. So that's good for our podcasters to know. So if they're tenants, then that's an avenue that they can follow.
Exactly. And it's happening, by the way. You're absolutely right, because again, I think things will change. Hopefully, the law will reform as well to allow these kind of things. In developed countries, you don't have this concept of 5 years and that kind of stuff.
Okay, so thanks, Paras, for sharing that wisdom. Just coming to COVID Kenya and Obizz, you're of course a very reputable and busy lawyer, and the COVID Kenya team is very honored and thankful to have you on board. But just tell us a bit more about what you are looking to contribute and get out of this initiative.
Yeah, I think, look, Sneha, when we first spoke about this, the idea was at that time there was a lot of information and misinformation that was getting out there. We were also quite concerned that there was no defined or focused channel for people to go to and get the right information. And I think the first thing is that it's been a good experience for me and very fulfilling to be part of that journey, to allow that channel to happen over various platforms that we have. So that's something that has been very positive. But what I in the long term, what would be great is to help our smaller businesses, for me, from a business point of view, with advice that they might otherwise find hard to get. So I think that would be great. From a people perspective, I think it will be great. I think it's very fulfilling to see people who can get the right advice, whether it's medical advice or other advice, through our channels. And to me, that's very fulfilling to be part of that. Not only for me to give that advice, but to get other people from our networks to do that. So I think that will be a great journey, and hopefully it will sustain itself post-COVID.
No.
Why not?
Absolutely. So thank you once again. And, as Paras said, through our various channels, we're going to be sharing this wisdom, of course, through the podcast, but it will become more and more interactive. And, we have the resources available with the right expertise to also help in a two-way beneficial manner.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Real
Paras.
pleasure.